It will be on the League's YouTube channel. You go to YouTube and then search for League of Women Voters, LWV, Greater Cleveland, and you'll be happy to find it. We also have slips of paper in the lobby with this information so that you can take that home with you. My name is Betsy Tracy. This forum was planned with Blanche Valancy and Rosemary Fairman of Voter Services, along with myself and Chapter Chair Wendy During. We want to thank the panelists who are giving their time tonight to help us understand the University Heights City Charter amendments on the November ballot. Thank you also to the League members who are helping staff this event tonight. You see some in the room wearing League buttons, and they are ready to hand out index cards and take your written questions and comments. We also have in the lobby very helpful League members who can give you voter registration information and vote by mail forms, as well as League membership information. Recording forums is an expense, and if you find it valuable to attend and or to view and share these recordings, please consider making a donation. We have a donation box on the table in the lobby. You can make an online donation at leagueofwomenvotersgreatercleveland.org. You need to click on Donate to a Chapter and then select League of Women Voters, Cleveland Heights, University Heights Education Fund. And again, we've written information on how to do this in the lobby. And last but not least, you are the first forum participants to get a copy of the 2023 voter guide, which was hot off the press as of Monday. Tonight's discussion focuses on page 8. So everyone has to turn to page 8, right? And we also have for you the official ballot language of the amendments as they will appear in the University Heights ballots that you would vote on. We can also find their voter guide at the League of Women Voters website and on the homepage of Heights Observer. And anywhere you get a copy of the October Heights Observer, you will find the voter's guide tucked inside there. So now I want to present our moderator for the evening, Susan Taft. Susan has been interested in pro-democratic action for several decades. After retiring from Kent State University as an associate professor, she's devoted more of her time to working with us, the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. Susan now lives in Pepper Pike, but for more than 20 years, she lived and raised her family in Cleveland Heights, so she's no stranger to the Heights area. Susan, thank you.
Welcome, everyone. As Betsy noted, this is a forum tonight on the 6 charter amendments that you will have before you to vote on in November, along with other issues also on the ballot in November. We are sponsored in partnership with both Heights Libraries and Future Heights, as Betsy noted. And we want to thank the Heights Libraries for use of this excellent space. The libraries are always very generous with these kinds of forums and provide us with a lot of support and help to get places where people can come, listen, and interact. First of all, I'd like to commend all of you for showing up tonight on local issues. As you all know, local issues have a major impact on our daily lives, and yet local issues tend to get the lowest voter turnout of any items that come up before the ballot. So all of you here are becoming informed about what you'll be voting on in November, and I commend you for showing up to learn more. Please share what you learned tonight with your friends and family so that the information spreads as much as possible. I need to say a few things about the League of Women Voters, and then I will go over the rules for tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, and it is recognized for its impartiality, its respected role promoting informed and active participation in government, and in advocating for good government policies. We do not support individual candidates or political parties. We can, however, take positions on issues when based on League study and review. On tonight's charter amendments, the League is neutral. We have taken we've done no particular study on it. The heavy lifters of tonight's forum are Betsy Tracy, Blanche Valancy, Rosemary Fairman, and Wendy During, who are the volunteers who organized all of this. It's impossible to describe to you how many moving pieces there are and parts. So tonight's volunteers, we had almost a dozen volunteers involved, and including myself, I'm a volunteer as well. So we do appreciate dues coming from our members, donations. And if any of you want to become members, just because we have women in the title does not mean men can't join. We do have male members. So you are welcome to join if you are a male. And we encourage you to join. Membership forms are out at the registration table. And Betsy already mentioned that we will have a video recording of this forum. Louis gets it up really fast, like tomorrow morning. It's what? It's live right now? Okay, so it's live right now, but you could watch it very soon also. We do urge you to, did everybody get a voter guide coming in? Does anybody not have a voter guide? Okay, good. Because we are going to have those voter guides available to refer to when we go over the charter amendments, and they will be on page 8. Let me go over the rules for tonight's forum. We have the 3 charter commission members here to speak with you about the 6 amendments on the ballot. There will not be a formal break, but if you need a break, you can informally get up and take a break whenever you need to. Not you, Steve. We do ask for the cooperation of the audience members that you refrain from expressing any sentiments for or opposition to any of the issues that are coming up in front of us tonight. They're not terribly controversial, so I'm not really worried about this audience. But we do want a civil discussion on the issues. We are not having a planned debate between opposing sides. So we do ask that you refrain from making statements or expressing sentiments from the audience, and remember that you are here to learn from the speakers. So tonight I'm going to introduce our 3 speakers. They are all longtime residents of University Heights and have contributed countless hours, days, weeks, and probably years to community service. There is a ton of experience sitting in front of you here, many years of work serving their communities. They were all members of the University Heights Charter Review Commission that is bringing forward the amendments for the November ballot. So I will introduce them. Mr. Stephen Wertheim, right in the blue check shirt, is a 38-year resident of University Heights and the chair of the University Heights Charter Review Commission. He is also chair of the Food Rescue Committee of the Hunger Network and serves on the boards of Reaching Heights, the Hunger Network, and Congregation Shari Tikva. He tutors at Garrity Elementary School. Mr. Wertheim is a former president of the Cleveland Heights University Heights Library Board and a former vice president of the Cleveland Heights University Heights School Board. He is the former Cuyahoga County Ombudsman and the former director of 211 First Call for Help. Next to him is Mr. Michael Cicero, grew up in University Heights, and as an adult, lived in the city for over 17 years. He is a member of Nicola Goodbranson and Cooper, LLC, practicing at local, state, and federal levels in various areas of municipal and public sector law, including civil and criminal trial, appellate litigation, civil rights defense, commercial trial and appellate litigation, corporate and real estate transactions, planning and zoning, and liquor license and business representation. He has over 31 years of prosecutorial experience and currently serves as the prosecutor and assistant law director for the City of University Heights and as legal counsel for the city's Charter Review Commission. He was elected to the Cleveland Heights University Heights School Board in 2005, and during his term served as school board president in 2008. Mr. Chris Myrick, the last on the table, is a 40-year resident of University Heights. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Technology from Central State University and served as vice chairperson of the Charter Review Commission. He also serves as the mayor's sustainability committee of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. Mr. Myrick is a retired information technology professional with extensive experience in the private and public sectors. We're now going to turn the forum over to our speakers. We have asked them to begin tonight by providing some background on the Charter Review Commission, specifically what leads to the CRC being convened. How are those on it selected? And what is the process for bringing amendments forward for a vote by city residents? Finally, please indicate why the 6 amendments were selected for advancement and why 4 or 5 of them were not. You don't need to go into detail on that because we will have more information about the issues that were not brought forward later. So speakers can decide how they want to present on the background of the Charter Review Commission. You can start. And if you have trouble hearing in the back, raise your hand and we'll have to force Mr. Wertheim to stand up. And
That'll be harder than you think. I have back trouble.
okay, keep your microphone close.
I will do that. I want to thank the Cleveland Heights University Heights League of Women Voters for granting us this time to present our amendments to the charter. I would also like to thank, on top of the members of the commission who are sitting here, there are 2 people out there who are members of our commission and basically 3. Oh, I see her. Yes, Margaret. Jackie Gould spent 11 months having to sit next to me, so I feel sorry for her. Harrison Crumrine, who his legal skills were very, very helpful to the commission, and Margaret Duffy Friedman, who is also a member of the commission. And guys, if you don't think you're not going to be called on at some point, you're wrong. Anyway, let's get to it. Some of the other members I already that weren't mentioned. Chris Myrick was vice chair. Secretary was Wesley Kretsch. Councilwoman Therese Marshall was on our committee. Dr. Alicia Sloan, Tyler Bobus, David Jackson, and Rabbi David Farkas. They truly represented our community. None of it would have been possible without their hard work and commitment. One of the things I want to talk about also, I want to mention very quickly, our commission unfortunately was not without tragedy. Friend and community activist Rick Brown, untimely death was a great loss to our community. His contributions were invaluable to us. And the recent loss by Jackie Gould of her husband Neil saddened us as well. Someone asked, what is a charter? How did we become? How are we formed? Well, council decides. Oh, I want to make one other comment. None of this would be possible. This 50-page document would not be possible without Jean Drayton's great help. She was our assistant from the city, and she was great. And she's happening to sit next to a guy who's trying to get in her limelight, Mayor Brennan. Anyway, thank you, Jean. What I wanted to say, a charter is if you can think of a charter as the equivalent of the Constitution of the city of University Heights. It's not the legal document, but it is the document from which all council people and the mayor then legislate from. We were formed. Council passed a resolution, an ordinance, and I don't remember the ordinance number. Do you? Anyhow, an ordinance that said the mayor would pick 4 people, and each council person would pick a person. Now, as I said, we were a very mixed group of people, but I think what really came out and what we started off and what was constant throughout this is something that's sometimes missing a lot. We were civil. There's civil discourse. We disagreed. There were people who disagreed with each other, but it didn't come to name calling. It did not, we did not hold that against those folks. So I wanted to tell you, that one of the most important things was that we met, and this was part of the resolution, the ordinance. We met twice a month, for about 11 months, and came up with this document. The other thing I wanted to say is that we really, when we look back, there are certain things that came out of the 10 amendments that we proposed. It was transparency, citizens' access to government, and pretty much true representation for everyone in our diverse community. As I said, I do have the number. It was in the summer of 2022, University Heights Council passed an ordinance, 2225, to create a charter review commission. What's interesting about this is for the 3rd time since the city's founding in 1941 have we had a charter review commission. One of the things we needed is a simple majority of the commission was not enough. There were 11 of us, but in order to pass a resolution, we needed 6 votes. One of the other things that, as I said, one of the other things that was different of this time was last time, if I've got this right, when the Charter Review Commission met and proposed its amendments, they went directly to the electors.
The commission that was established in 2008, 2009, that ordinance required that anything that was passed by the Charter Commission automatically got put on the ballot. And a lot of other communities have that in actually their charter. In this ordinance that council passed, forming this version of the commission simply, if they passed something, it went to council for consideration, and council as a whole could pick and choose what would actually be sent to the ballot. And that's what was done.
I'm just going to go very quickly because we're going to go down each one of these issues, but I just want to go down them very quickly. And I'm actually going to go through all 10 real quick, and there'll be an 11th that I'll talk about for in a second. Gender neutrality. When we looked at the charter, this charter amendment, what it would do is, frankly, would replace gendered terms and language throughout the city charter with gender neutral and gender inclusive terms and language. This proposed amendment would correct the long-standing, we called it sexist, androcentric language of the charter and replace it with language that communicates and promotes a more inclusive city and government. We had 7 yeas and 1 abstention on that. Obviously, when you're doing a year-long project and everybody, I repeat, was a volunteer, you can't always expect everybody to be there. This one passed council with 5 votes. And the reason I mention that's important is that it was also for a resolution for an amendment to pass. If I've got this correct, we needed a two-thirds vote. A simple majority was not enough. Am I correct on that? Yes, from council. So at that time, at the time of the vote, there were only 5 council members present. 1 hadn't been reappointed. and one was away at the time. So when I say something passes, it had to pass, frankly, unanimously with all 5. The next thing we looked at, believe it or not, we recommended eliminating term limits for elected officials. We understand the reason in the 1990s everybody was pushing for term limits. But what we've seen under term limits is elected officials looking to run for the next position more without having people who have years of experience, and somehow years of experience is, quote, a bad thing. I look at Sue, no, it isn't. But what we determined and what best practices were showing is that term limits was something that really did not serve our communities, whether at the state, local, or national level. Well, it passed with 7 yeas and 1 abstention. The council, it did not pass council, so we didn't get quite the 5 votes. The next thing I wanted to mention is the law director. In most cities, and this is where I'll look to you, but the law director, in most cities, the law director reports to the mayor. In this city, for whatever reason, the law director reports to council. Well, most of the work, the law director, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, the law director's work is with the city itself. We had come up with what we thought was a solution that a majority of council still had to approve the law director, and if that law director was considered deficient in duties, we could then pick a new law director. How much time am I going way over or what?
Let me.
I'll go quick. Okay,
Let,
5 minutes. Okay, quickly.
could I just say one thing?
Yeah.
You started going over one of the amendments
Yeah.
that is not coming forward
Yeah.
for
Oh, you don't
vote.
want to hear about it. Okay.
Well, yes, we do want to hear about it.
I
but
will wait
we-
on that.
We
Okay.
wanted to have you cover the ones first that are coming forward for
Okay.
vote. And I have some questions on those.
Okay.
And
well,
then go back to the ones that are not being brought forward.
Okay. Do you want me to? We can stop. If what you would like me to do is stop, I can stop when one, or we can go into more details into the.
Well, I'd like you to cover all the ones that are coming
Okay.
forward. But I also need to ask you, one of the questions we wanted you to address was, how did people on the commission get selected?
Well, they were selected. Each council person was able to pick one person, so that was 7, and the other 4 were chosen by the mayor. And the interesting thing is that we had to replace a commission member because they just weren't able to make it. And honestly, I couldn't have told you who was appointed by whom. I'm sure I knew it at the beginning, but what was impressive about this group is that they really were concerned about the city itself. Did that answer that question? Yes. Okay. I won't go into the next, and the other one was a very simple thing. Department name modernization. Now that's usually the boring stuff that goes on charter review. It comes out of charter reviews. But what we were doing was updating the names and the departments so they fit with what the departments are called on a regular basis. This, as I said, this charter has only been looked at 3 times. So we did an update on that, and we made sure there was one thing in there that we would, that council, we made it clear that council could make changes, but the one area they could not change, they could add new departments, but they could not get rid of the Department of Public Safety. The next thing we had was recall elections. Recall elections, frankly, we had a system in University Heights. I don't think it's ever been used, but if someone is successfully recalled, they're actually not recalled. They're put on the ballot with everybody else, and if they win, the recall is done. And essentially what we've done here and tell me if I'm wrong, is that we've set up a recall process whereby we're actually recalling the individual, such that if a majority of the electorate decides this person should be recalled, then what we will do is leave it to council to fill the vacancy. The other thing that we thought was very important was initiatives and referendums. We wanted to make it easier for initiatives, and one of the things that was on the was in the 5% of all registered voters were needed to sign a petition in to put an initiative or referendum on the ballot. Well, what we found out, and Mike, I think you know this better, is that that was against the law.
It was actually found illegal by the Ohio Supreme Court in 95. We'll get into it in detail. The 0809 Charter Review Commission missed that. So as far as legalities or illegalities, the recall, as well as the same time frame on initiative and referendum and recall, those are substantive provisions that need to be addressed by the voters, we're hopeful.
Also, one of the 1 minute, gee, okay, council's presiding officer. Right now, the mayor is the presiding officer at all council meetings, and we thought there was a real need to separate the legislative and the executive. If this resolution passes, the vice mayor will preside at all council meetings, set agendas, etc. The last one was an anti-discrimination amendment. And this amendment was updated to deal with some of the issues that we're seeing right now. Discrimination against people because of their sexual orientation or that they are transgender and the like. And we made sure, while all around us there seems to be a real chipping away at this, we made sure with this amendment that this kind of discrimination could not happen to employees or people applying for work in University Heights. And that's that. The final thing I want to just mention is quickly, what was the process when we were done? On May 31st, it says stop. I will stop. We'll get into it later. Okay.
We have taken written questions, have come in over the internet, and any of you who would like to submit a question, please raise your hand to get a card and raise your hand. You're ready to hand it in, and our runners will bring it up to me to read to the commission members. To start, so I have 4 questions so far. We'll probably get a few more. Please, this is on benefits to residents of University Heights. Please give examples of how any and all proposed amendments will directly benefit University Heights residents.
You want to take a shot?
Oh, sure. With respect to the two, from a legal standpoint, the gender neutrality and non-substantive changes, that's the other provision about issue 82. It's not just to make the charter gender neutral. The proposed amendment gives council the power by a unanimous vote to correct typos in the charter, grammatical, organizational sequencing, anything non-substantive. And so it's not just about making it neutral, it's about making it a little bit more flexible if the codifier misprints something or something of that nature. The other two that to me are very important as a lawyer is you got to follow the law, right? And so initiatives and referendum, as well as recall, from a procedural, not substance, but from procedure, if we maintained that you had to have 25% of the registered voters to get on the ballot on an issue, how do you know how many registered voters there are on any day of the week? And that is why the Supreme Court found it illegal back in 95. You don't know, as someone who wants to get an initiative petition or a referendum petition or a recall petition, you don't know how many registered voters there are until the day that you turn the petitions in. So therefore, the proper, if you will, baseline is a X% of voters who voted in the last municipal election. You know exactly how many that is. So not only does it lessen the number that you might need to have a petition that is sufficient, but you know before you even start how many signatures you need. And that's really important.
Mr. Merrick?
Yeah, I might chime in.
Myrick.
For
Myrick, sorry.
either is fine. I might chime in also regarding the numbers. If we went with registered voters, to make the math easy, let's say it's 9,000, it's actually 8,898. That's a pretty high bar to do an initiative or a referendum. Whereas we went with the voters in the last election, we're talking about 3,282. So for citizens, I think it's better for democracy.
Any other comments about direct? This is a rather general question. What are the direct benefits to the citizens of University Heights? Any other amendments that you'd like to comment about direct benefit to citizens?
Well, I think what we're trying to do, as I said earlier, if we look at these amendments as a whole, it makes it easier for citizens to petition government as a group. Now, ironically, if I've got this right, Mayor, we had about 4,000 people vote in August. I mean, we get those kind of numbers again. I just did the math to get a petition directly on the ballot. That would be we need 1,000 signatures to do that now. So that's pretty wild, but that's not normally the case. But what I was trying to say is there's something else here too. What we're also saying here, at a time when things around us, we are seeing, and eating away at people's rights and the like. What we're saying here in University Heights is this is an inclusive place. This is a place, no matter your gender, no matter your, sexual preference, no matter whether you are a woman or a man, we had pieces in this charter that basically said in the civil service section that there were jobs for men and jobs for women. And that was a little bizarre. And so when we look at these pieces combined, it makes it a safer place to work in the city. It is also saying that this city is available. People can work here in this community or for this city, and they will not face discrimination for their life choices.
Good, thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Cicero or Mr. Myrick?
I could be flippant and say that the building department should be called the building department. For those of you that don't know, the actual legal name in University Heights is the Division of Building, Engineering, and Inspection. But if you look in the code, it says building department all over the place. And to me, it's not a direct benefit, but everybody likes to be put together. Everybody likes to have their ducks in a row. And it just doesn't make the city look good to have this here. And then in some of the older ordinances, it still has that old term.
Yeah.
And then in more modern ordinances, it has the new term that we all use. That's on the side of the building, right?
Well, and the only other thing I would mention here too is that if you look through the charter as it sits now, it just says he.
Yeah.
The generic is he. Now, the last time, I believe it was the last time the charter review went in front of the commission, put amendments in front of the voters, something came out that said, when you see he, just think of everybody. Well, I don't know that works. Thank you.
Okay. So here's a question on language for issues 84, 85, and 87.
So we have to look.
And it asks precisely what will be changed from the current charter language by issues 84, 85, and 87. So if one of them was gender neutrality, I think you have addressed that.
84 is initiative and petition
And
and referendum.
referendum.
85 is recall elections, and 87 is anti-discrimination.
Yeah.
The big thing with 84 and 85 is, one, the baseline for how many signatures you need in a petition, as we've just talked about, is the number of voters that voted in the last municipal election. I would tell you, based on Steve's comment a moment ago, 1,000 voters in August, I will predict that that will be eclipsed in November because of issues 1 and 2 on the ballot. I think it's going to be a huge turnout.
And 5.
And 5, yeah. And so that's going to set the bench the next 2 years for those kinds of things. The other thing, 84, and you'll see some timing issues, some number of days in 84 and 85. When I confer with the Board of Elections, our charter, as you've said, has been reviewed 2 times before only. Even in 2009, the degree of absentee voting did not exist as it exists in 2023. So those timeframes you see in both issues 84 and 85 were requested specifically by the Board of Elections, so the Board of Elections can get out absentee ballots and receive mail ballots in. And as Steve has said and Chris has said, as a whole, this commission is about access to government. And so we wanted to make sure collectively as a body that we sent that up to council for council's consideration and review, so that if you have an initiative, a referendum, or a recall, and you can't make it to the ballot box, that you still have that time frame within which to vote. And so that's why those timings are in there. The last thing about 85, from my perspective, my mom and dad were married by Mayor Aurelius at City Hall in 1962. And the city had only been around for 20 years, because before that, it was the village of Idlewood, right? And the village of Idlewood was a statutory village. There are a few statutory villages around. And Steve began his remarks by talking about what is a charter. It is a local constitution, but there are still communities out there, whether they're villages, which are cities without, villages are municipal corporations with less than 5,000 people. Cities have over 5,000. But when we were a village here, there was no charter. So you have to follow things in the revised code. And wouldn't you know that one of the specific duties of the mayor in a statutory village is to run the council meetings? I represent other villages. The mayors don't run the meetings. If you go to another community, who's running the meetings? The president of council, typically. In some cities, the president of council is elected to that specific position. Unlike all the council members get together and like, okay, you're going to be the president of council. So that's the other thing. That's an anachronism, if you will, in the recall process. That's an anachronism for the who runs the meetings. The same thing with the recall provision. The recall provision we have still exists in the revised code for a statutory village. And it's if whoever's going to get recalled, their name is on the ballot, and then if they want, their name is on the ballot to be recalled and on the same ballot to be reelected. That's just the way the law reads. Every other community, you're either recalled or not. If you are the mayor and recalled, typically the president of council takes over, or the vice mayor. If you're a council member, council has 30 days to select a new council member. If not, the mayor appoints.
Because I know there are people watching this and may not have the material here, I'd just like to read you really quickly what is in the anti-discrimination issue 87. And
Could we hold that for just a minute? I have a
sure.
follow-up question for
Sure.
Mr. Cicero.
Go for it.
This goes with what you were saying, Mr. Cicero. I think this is asking to identify places that have a member of council run the council meetings. It says, are there other municipal governments that provide for a member of council, such as a president or vice mayor, to be the presiding officer? Would you like to name some examples?
The only community of the 7 that I represent that the mayor runs the village is Gates Mills. In every other community that I represent, South Euclid, the president of council. In Richmond Heights, president of council. In in Maple Heights that I've represented, president of council. So the only community, Mayfield Village, president of council. The only community that I am aware of that does it, and it's, by the way, it's in their charter.
Okay.
It's in their charter as well. And part of it comes from when you go from a village to a city, some of the old habits just stay on because it's the way things have always been done. That's all. But in every other community that I'm affiliated with, and others that I've appeared before, say representing someone on an application for zoning or something, the president of council or the vice mayor always runs the meeting.
So here's a contrary question. What is the argument in favor of allowing the mayor to preside over council meetings?
Well, it's interesting because I think in general, there is support. Let's talk about what's out there. I mean, let's face it, charter review doesn't happen in a vacuum. I'm sure if we look at the old charters, there's politics that we have no idea about, except maybe a couple of people in this room, that, you know, why certain things happened in the last charter or the one before that. What I will say is that the council voted 5-0 in favor of that. That included the now vice mayor of the city of University Heights, and it had the enthusiastic support of the mayor. I think if we look at this, not just on a local level, but even on a state or national level, separating the executive and the legislative makes life a lot easier. The mayor has to make an agenda for the council. I think the council's pretty good. I think the council knows what they want on their agenda, and I think it makes a lot of sense for separation. And I think it actually, how would I say, there's almost a border there. I mean, we all grew up with civics. Most of us are old enough to have had that, but we understand the difference between what a legislative body like city council is and what an executive body, and the difference is what they have to do. You know, council legislates, the mayor implements.
If I can analogize from two school board members, it would be the same as if say we're on a school board and we go to a school board meeting, if the superintendent ran the meeting as opposed to the president of council or president of the board.
I'll tell you how
Good
civil.
example.
I'll tell you how civil we were on our charter review commission. In 2005, this guy beat me by 75 votes for school board.
275.
It wasn't 275, 75.
Are you done?
I'm done. I'm sorry.
All right. I'd like to move on to the anti-discrimination
Okay.
amendment. We have two questions on that. First one is, what is the current anti-discrimination policy of University Heights? And how will this amendment improve upon the current policy?
How about, this is we added this, am I correct? This is in section 8, which is miscellaneous, the famous miscellaneous where you throw everything else in the charter that I remembered. It's 8 is pretty good. And there really wasn't an anti-discrimination piece in there at the time. And that isn't to say that council and the mayor, you know, had legislated in their legislation in the way they operate. There was no example of what I would say discriminatory activity. But what you have to remember, I think in the last 2 years, we've had at least 4 new council people, and maybe even 5. I'm not sure. So what's good and what's working today, there's no guarantee 5 years from now that you get a very different council on. So that's what a constitution is, and that's what a charter is. And I just want to read this real quickly. Basically, what we are saying is the city shall not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, age, disability, marital or partnership status, sex or sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. This is where things get a little interesting. Genetic information, the world has changed. Pregnancy, citizenship status, caste, or tribal affiliation, or any other classification protected by applicable federal, state, or local law. And it's interesting because, I'm going back to Mr. Myrick. He was the one who came up with caste. And I thought, really? That's an issue? And then I was talking to my son-in-law who works for a corporation in Cincinnati, and he's part of the high-tech side of it. And he said, we've had problems where a manager is from one caste and doesn't want to hire somebody else because they're from, quote, a lower caste. No, we never thought of these things before.
I think, doesn't that refer generally to people who've come from India?
Right.
Where
Yeah.
it tends to be Indian
But
nationality.
But this is also the changing nature of a diverse community too. We're not expecting this to happen, and I doubt that University Heights would ever allow that to happen. But as I said, we're not looking at a chart. I mean, it's been done 3 times since 41. So what we're trying to do is not protect ourselves against today, but protect ourselves for 10 years from now.
And the other thing in that regard is very clear to the commission when this came up. This does not create a cause of action against the city in any way, shape, or form. Most people aren't aware of this. If you violate the Ohio Constitution, because there's equal rights in the Ohio Constitution, there's due process in the Ohio Constitution, you can't sue for money for violating the Ohio Constitution. And if you think about, you hear these civil rights lawsuits, they're all federal. It's all based on federal law. So to me, as a lawyer, when I look at this, this is a clear statement of intent, and if passed by the whole community, that we're not going to tolerate any kind of discrimination of any way, shape, or form. What doesn't expose the city at the same time.
Good. Thank you. Second question on anti-discrimination. Please provide, and any of you can speak up, please provide examples of discrimination that would be, quote, necessary and related to job duties and responsibilities. And maybe you need to read the amendment, because there is something in there about necessary.
Yes, I didn't read the entire amendment. She got
But
me.
just a sentence with
Yes,
necessary.
I can give you
Yeah,
the
why don't you
perfect one.
talk about it? Yes.
Okay, good.
There is a car, and the car is on Warrensville Center Road. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's sitting in front of Bialy's, and it's not moving. And a police officer goes there, and it's a drunk female behind the wheel of the car. And they test her, and they arrest her, and they take her back to the University Heights Police Department. Do you want a male police officer frisking her and patting her down? No, you get a female officer. So there are certain duties and certain descriptions that are just inappropriate, that even expose you to other, if you will, lawsuits. Jails have a jailer and, quote unquote, a matron for female prisoners when you have them. And thank God we pretty much take all of our prisoners to Solon. We don't have a local jail anymore. But that's like just one specific instance where it's just inappropriate for a male to carry out those duties.
But one of the things that, and when you asked me to read the last sentence, it says, or local law, which we talked about, unless reasonably necessary to normal operations and having a substantial relationship to the job functions and responsibilities.
The other one that's going to come up that we only briefly touched on at the commission, that as somebody who represents municipalities and defends municipalities, that I'm terrified of. For years, police officers, in order to apply as an entry-level position, you could only be of a certain age. You couldn't be over 30. That was litigated, and it was expected that based upon a political subdivision or the state of Ohio's expenditures in training an officer, whether it be fire or police, it's reasonable that they're going to work until they're 65, if not 55. It's reasonable that they're going to work for towards what is their 25-year pension. So it was expected, and courts have routinely held, that you could put that age limit on. However, if you haven't heard, there is a scarcity of people that want to become police officers, and to a lesser degree, those that want to become firefighters. The pension's not as good. The hazard is tremendous. So now you've seen departments, both police and fire, not just in the area, but across the country. Now it's 35. There are some departments that will hire you when you're 40, up to 40. So there are those types of things where age, because remember, and my kids always say this, right? They're 26 and 22. Or they're discriminating against me because I'm 26. And I said, that's okay. Under federal law, you can discriminate against anybody as long as they're under 40. And I can tell you off to the side about stories about people who, once they start to approach, especially in sales, they start to approach 40, that their job duties start to change. So that's another example. Age, because it's reasonable to expect a public employee to work for a certain period of time.
Good, thank you. Supply and demand, I guess, right?
Yeah.
We have exhausted all the questions that came in on the amendments that are going up for vote in November, which means we can now get to the amendments that are not coming up for vote, of which there are 5, correct?
Four, and there was one that did not get out of. We actually looked at 11 potential amendments. 10 got out of the commission. 1 never got out of the commission, but I think it's worth talking about as well. Because it was
Okay,
a close vote.
so what I would like to do, I think we have a list of those on the flip chart. Of those amendments not coming up for vote this year. They tend to be more controversial issues, and they may come up in future elections. So we decided if we had enough time to cover these, it would be good voter education and community discussion to go over these different amendments. So I'm going to ask us to go one amendment at a time, not all together, so that it's clear which ones we're talking about. And Mr. Myrick, were you going to start this?
Sure. So the first amendment that was not passed by council was eliminating term limits. Currently, we have the charter limits elected officials to no more than 3 4-year consecutive terms, whether they're elected or appointed, with a maximum consecutive years of 14 years. This was enacted in the 90s when there was a movement to restrict people from staying in office too long. However, academic research has shown that term limits increase polarization, reduce experience, and reduce voter turnout. So there's been a move towards looking at whether we should go back and let the voters decide when someone has been in office enough. One of the things we did when we looked at the charter in general is we looked at what's called a model cities charter, and it's put together by the, help me out here, Steve.
Is it the National League of Cities?
Which consists of mayors, city managers, and other elected officials. And they recommend eliminating term limits.
I just want to mention, this was Margaret Duffy Friedman's amendment, and you should know, Margaret, it was yours, and you should know that we as a commission voted 10-0 in favor of this. after hearing all the arguments in regard to it.
And it was an interesting discussion, and from a historical perspective and my experience with communities, and I could not recall because it was right before I moved back to University Heights as an adult, but I do remember that this charter amendment, the term limits provision that was enacted, was done so by council to send to the vote. There was no charter review commission. The charter review commission met in 79 and 2008, but this was passed in the 90s. So the only other way to amend the charter is that a supermajority of people on University Heights Council at the time put a charter amendment to the ballot for the people to vote. And there was enough votes to put it in. And in my experience, I believe it was aimed, I'm just going to say, it was aimed at Mayor Rothschild. I think I had surmised that it had something to do with Northwood because of that fiasco. I don't know at that time, but it would have been around that time. And the other person that it was targeted at was Mayor Egensberger in Mayfield Heights. And neither has been repealed yet by a charter amendment. So both Mayfield Heights and University Heights still have these term limits in for all of council and the mayor. And it forces a turnover at the local level.
So are you saying Sue Pardee would still be a council person? Sorry.
Correct, I would. I am.
One other thing I wanted to say about that. Well, actually, it can wait. It can wait. We're going to go to the next thing.
What's the next one, Law Director?
The next,
Yeah, anything else any of the rest of you want? I don't have any questions about ranked choice voting. So
I would.
I'm sorry, term limits, about term limits. So we will move on to the next one unless we get questions. So any of you in the audience who can see one of the amendments that you're interested in, if you have a question on it, write your question, get it up to me so we can ask it of the commission members.
it's Law Director.
Okay.
Law Director.
All right. Well,
So the next.
Yeah, go ahead.
The next amendment that was passed by the Charter Review Commission, passed 9-0 in the commission, is to have the law director appointed and how they're appointed and removed. Currently, a law director is appointed and removed by city council. We're recommending that it be changed, that they be appointed by the mayor with the approval of council. Most of the work that the law director does is for the city. The mayor is the chief executive of the city. It is, in most organizations, the chief executive has all of the branches, all of the departments report to the chief executive. This is done in the county level. This is done in cities around us, Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, South Euclid. It's done in Warrensville Heights. It's done in Highland Heights. So our proposal is to have the law director report to the mayor, be hired by the mayor with the approval of council.
And having been in this business for 33 years, all in the public sector, this is the only city I'm aware of that council completely controls who the law director is. And every other city I have ever been affiliated with or have worked with or for, the law director is appointed by the mayor, subject to confirmation of council. And similarly, and why council did not put this on the ballot, in order to remove the law director, you have to have a majority of council approve the removal. And that's where the rub was and why council voted this down. And they verbalized that we see the logic, but in the proposed amendment that was sent, only the mayor could remove with no councilmanic involvement. So the way I had took it, council might bring it up again. And then as a practice, the law director serves every department head, mayor, and council member of the city that he or she represents. We get calls from council members, department heads, and the mayor in every city that we're affiliated with. And even though, say, the mayor might appoint, and you probably work very closely, and every city's different. You might work very closely with the mayor and all the department heads on a daily basis. So don't kid yourselves that the law director doesn't work for the members of council as well, because that's who butters his or her bread. It's a reality, like with every employee that works in the public sector. That's just the reality. And sometimes law director's role is to try to keep the peace between the executive and the legislative.
And could you indicate why this amendment and the term limits amendment were not brought forward to vote?
If I were to guess about term limits, this might have been where we were very idealistic. If we had put term limits on the ballot, I mean, I personally, from what I have learned and the commission was convinced of, is that we think term limits are a negative. But I think to sell that right now at this time to the community might have been very difficult. And I can't read into their minds, but my guess is that putting anytime an elected official puts something on the ballot that says, oh, I can go on longer, it will be perceived, even if it's a good idea, I think it'll be perceived by most voters as self-serving. So that would be my guess on that one.
Okay,
And there was no stated reason by council, as I recall, being at that meeting. But one of the overarching things that I had advised both the Charter Review Commission and council is a distinctive and very real thing that happens at elections, which is called voter fatigue. The more charter amendments that get put on the ballot, the less likely the majority of them are to pass. I have seen in communities where the gender neutrality, which is a no-brainer, fails because that was the 12th amendment on the ballot. I'm concerned about the initiative and referendum, and I'm concerned about the recall. Why? Look at the ballot. Look at your ballot and see how long it is. People's eyes glaze over. The print is what, 8 pitch, if that? And it's like reading the fine print in some contract. And they're like, I'm not reading this. No. That's another reason.
okay.
Another reason that it may not have gone up is because you can only submit so many. The way the actual ordinance was written, after a while, you get voter fatigue.
Okay. All right, good. For the charter items not on the ballot in 2023, can they be acted on prior to the next charter review process? Or
Well-
did they have to go through a charter
Well-
review process first?
As we mentioned about term limits, 5 council members can put, with the support of the mayor, can put a charter amendment on the ballot and just skip the whole charter review commission. So the answer to that is that's one way. Another way that we're looking at, and it's when we start looking at things like I'm saying, you know, the recall elections, that's not so much that I worry about, I care about, but what I like is what we're doing around the ability for people to petition government, making it easier to put something on the ballot. Now, let's say they decide not to have a charter review commission and not respond. Well, what we have done through the initiative process is easier for a group of citizens to bypass if necessary. Now it's going to be it'd be a lot of work, but it could be done if there was interest. When someone asked earlier, what's so good about what we've been doing and what we have gotten, we've made it easier for citizens to make change on their own. And I know that's a little scary for some people, but no, I think the more access people feel they have to government and the ability to make change, I think the more they are willing to interact with government, ergo vote.
All right, thank you. We have two other, or two and a half. We have the decennial charter review and ranked choice voting. And then was there something that's sort of half in the door and half
Yeah, hybrid council.
hybrid
Let me
council?
just, can I just address decennial real quick?
Yeah,
I have absolutely no idea why council didn't put that on the ballot. I don't think it would be voter fatigue because it would be like 2 sentences on a ballot issue. And this is only the third time this commission has convened since 1941. I think most cities, and we looked at the model one from the National League of Cities, and we've looked at other communities, it's mandatory that you have a civil service commission within every 5, 7, or 10 years because times change. And look, we're stuck with the federal constitution and courts interpreting that. It's hard to change that, right? So I just don't know why. I don't know why that happened because it would have been nice to have that periodic mandatory review.
One of the interesting things, one of the issues that came up is one council person was concerned. She said, well, the politics could get involved here, but, and saying, let it go, let us choose when that could be. And I think one of the suggestions was every 20 years. But as I said earlier, we've had a big change in council. I mean, I believe, is it 5 out of 7 have are new to council in the last 2 years. So we've had a lot of turnover. So I think the concept of making you do this every 10 years is important. I think it gets the community involved. Yes. Commissioner Gould, what would you say?
I think there was a discussion of the fact that because there are term limits, are not term limits. I mean, there are, that people would rotate off the be more apt to have a commission. That was one of the issues. So I want to say that. And the second thing I want to say is I wanted you to
Use the microphone. The league may not be informal, but we are.
But I also wanted to have Steve or somebody talk about the fact that the council and the mayor had input into our process. So
Yes.
that there were some things that were talked about that the mayor and the council either agreed or disagreed about, and that had some, I want to say influence, but it was certainly a part of our decision-making.
I think you handled that perfectly, Jackie.
thank you. All right, anything else about the decennial charter review? Okay. So we have ranked choice voting and hybrid council.
I would like to invite up Harrison Crumrine, who's sitting in the back to talk about ranked choice voting, since that was his baby. Harrison, come up here. You said you would. Is that okay?
It's fine. None of you knew that you were going to be pulled in for participation.
he knew.
But with your permission, do you want to make a few comments?
Sure. Close. Okay. Thanks. My name is Lee Crumrine or Harrison, either one. I was a commission member. I was the proponent for the ranked choice voting amendment. So that is one that is not going to be on the ballot this November, but we still have hope for getting that on the ballot in the future. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for asking that question of the candidates at the candidate forum the other night. And we were encouraged by all the candidates' productive discussion about that issue. None of them shut the door on the issue for us. They all seem generally supportive of continuing to discuss ranked choice voting, what would be the best fit for our community. So just to explain briefly what it is, it's an election system that gives voters the opportunity to rank their choices for an office in order of preference. So this November on your ballot for council, you'll have the instructions to vote for no more than 4 candidates for council. If our proposal were implemented for this election, you would have the opportunity to rank 6 of those candidates in order of preference. And there is a tabulation process. Think of it, I think you could think of ranked choice voting as just a series of instant runoffs within elections. So you're voting on a contingent basis who, if your first choice candidate can't be elected mathematically, who would be your next choice. And that gives you a voice determining who is going to be elected to that seat, even if your first choice is otherwise an unpopular choice. So the problem that solves is vote splitting, strategic voting. So think of, presidential elections in the primaries where there are maybe a few different candidates that you like and a couple that you don't like. But so you have to make a choice during that election. Do you support the candidate you like best, who may not have a chance to win that election, or do you vote strategically for a candidate that's acceptable to you, who does have more of a chance to win? So this lets voters vote their consciences on their ballots, and that's the main benefit to it. In our community, we have a diverse community, so what our proposal would allow is various any kind of minority community of interest, if it's economic, racial, religious. It'll give them more voice in our elections. They will be able to help determine the outcome of the elections, even if they're outvoted by a large majority otherwise. Do you have any?
I wanted to give an analogy because people get confused about this. So I'm on my phone because I'm pulling up the current Associated Press college football poll. Okay. The Associated Press college football poll. So right now, this week, Georgia's number 1 with 1,501 points, if you will. And that's made up of AP writers across the United States. And then in parentheses, it says 35. So they got 35 first place votes. Second is Michigan, 12 first place votes. Third, Texas with 10. Fourth, Ohio State with 1. So if this were a race, first state would drop off because they're finished last. So somebody else may have given the votes to make Michigan number 1, and that 1 vote would go to Michigan. And maybe then number 3, the 10 people that voted for Texas go to Michigan. So in other words, you have to rank your people, and they've done this in sports for years with most valuable player and things like that, where who's your most, who's your second, who's your third, who's your fourth. And what it really is, and we see this in our community as well as others that don't have this kind of thing, you get without 50% plus 1. You can get elected by 37% of the people, depending on how many people are in your race. And that's a special position. For council, I think we're down with the council ranked choice voting was that it's somewhat confusing. And council expressed that. They felt it was confusing.
It is definitely a little more complicated, the tabulation. For the mayor's race, that form of ranked choice voting is called instant runoff voting. So the way that works is it's to fill a single seat, single position, like our mayor's race. So in that case, we had 4 candidates at the last election. The first round of tabulation would be everybody's first choice for mayor. If nobody gets 50% plus 1 vote, then the candidate who has the least amount of votes is eliminated, and then on their ballots in the next round will count towards their next choice candidate. So whoever they put down as their second choice candidate will win. And that keeps going until all the candidates, until they're eliminated and one candidate has 50%. But in our council races, it'll be different because it's a multi-seat election. So again, it counts. Everybody's first choice is what counts each round. So if one candidate, so there's an election threshold. In races with 4 candidates, that election threshold will be 20% that they have to reach. And if there's 3 seats,
For 25%.
right, 420, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm a lawyer, not great at math.
It's also a lawyer too.
All right, so there's election thresholds for council that they have to reach. If one candidate gets to the election threshold, they are elected, and any vote they have above that amount is a surplus, and that is redistributed to candidates that are still active and still in competition for a seat. And if after that surplus is redistributed, then and no candidate has reached the threshold, then like the mayor's race, the bottom candidate's eliminated and their votes are redistributed. And that keeps going until there are enough candidates filling the number of seats that are up for election.
There is a quiz before you
Yeah.
leave, by the way.
It is,
Yeah. Let me just say one thing too. One of the comments was we may be too small to be doing this. Well, Middlebury, Vermont does it, and they have 9,100 people in their city. Also, Minneapolis, New York City. One of the complaints you heard is that we didn't know instantly who won. They had to wait the next day to find out who the mayor of New York City was. I know we need instant satisfaction these days, but it doesn't always happen. The other thing is that it's not just it's a left-wing sort of thing. No, it's being implemented in Alaska as well, ranked choice voting. And the voters there seem to have figured it out.
Yeah, I think when it went to council, there were 2 issues. The sense I got from the council discourse was that they could see it in a 1-person race, but they seemed to be confused when you had multiple seats at the same time. And then there was an issue as to whether or not Cuyahoga County was set up for it. Cuyahoga County had been set up for it, but they chose new voting machines. And I think right now they're going through the process because they must be federally certified to perform that function. But by the time our next election, municipal election occurs in 2 years, those machines will be in place and they can handle ranked choice voting.
So I just want to reflect on when we had the council forum last week. I think almost every person running for council was in favor of ranked choice voting. But there were strong statements about how it's confusing to a community if they haven't been educated in understanding it. So there's a preparatory period that those council members thought would be necessary before you initiate ranked choice voting.
In our amendment, Steve. Oh, sorry. In our amendment, we had a 2-year. I've got this right, Harrison. This wasn't going to be implemented right away. It was 2 years from the time it was voted on by the electorate. So we wanted to give time, A, to the Board of Elections, and B, to deal with exactly what you're saying, education as well.
So we got another question here for council ranked choice voting. Are you ranking the top 6 or the top 9?
Well, that go ahead, Chris, but that was one of the interesting discussions that we had because I have seen no studies. I know what ranked choice voting is supposed to do, but let's take this year's council race, right? Just be practical. You've got a slate of 4, and then an individual running by himself.
Right.
So what's going to stop you as a voter from going and voting for your slate? You're undervoting. You're not ranking all 9.
Right.
You're just voting for your slate, and then you stop.
Yeah, in the last 3 city council races, the undervote has ranged from a low of 23% to a high of 46%. So what undervote is let's say if this year you have 4 candidates running, and let's say you only vote for 2. Well, you just produced a 2-vote undercount, a 2-vote undervote. And you might say, well, that happens all the time. No, not really. In the mayor's race, there was only a 2% undervote. And in a little tiny race for a precinct person, there was only a 9% undervote. So it has been occurring in councils, and it could be because of plunking or strategic voting, or it could be don't know, don't care. I'm not sure.
I mean, even if you took that as the mayor's race right now, which is the most, let's say, the simplest, let's say there are 5 people running. I mean, someone said you're cutting it off at 6. Well, okay, we have 9 people running, but if you just vote for one, I mean, someone can win in this election with 9 people running. They may be able to win with 900 votes. And you know, out of a city that has a potential of what, 8,000 voters. So, and we've seen that where we didn't have quite as many people running the last time, but the difference, they were all in around 1,000. So what it also does, what ranked choice voting also does, is that it kind of, you can't just appeal to your block. You know, in other words, if there's a certain group that you can depend on, what we've seen in other states and cities is elected people running for office saying, well, if I'm not your first choice, make me your second choice. And then the minute you have to start appealing to a larger group of people, all of a sudden you have to move more towards the center. You have to actually listen to what folks are saying. You can't just say, okay, I've got my block of 15% that'll put me over the top.
Which actually leads us into the issue that that the commission did not pass, the hybrid form of council. That was the same reason.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. So I have one more question on ranked choice voting, which, by the way, hasn't been mentioned, but it does, as Steve indicated, it does tend to draw people toward the middle. People who get elected are more toward the middle rather than more extreme on one side or the other of the political parties. So that is really the motivation that is pushing ranked choice voting around the country right now, where places are trying it. This question, they ask, how did it come to your attention? Did you have long and detailed conversations about it? And why did council reject this forward for vote?
So I first heard about ranked choice voting on an NPR program. And then I heard about it in San Francisco. And then somewhere in, I think it was in March of 2022, Baldwin Wallace political science class, they held a ranked choice voting exercise. And in this class, they had people on the far right and people on the far left. They had Trump supporters and they had Bernie Sanders supporters. And they had a ranked choice voting exercise. And who do you think won? I'll tell you this, he's a senator and he's from the East. It wasn't Bernie Sanders, it was Cory Booker. And when I thought about it, I said, of course, he's really inoffensive to just about everybody. I think
Is
him
that a
and
good thing?
I think him and Tim Scott get along, and I think he gets along with most of his colleagues. I even saw a commercial where 2 people were running for, I think it was for mayor or council in an eastern city. And it was a guy and a lady. And the guy says, for all my supporters, vote for me first and vote for my friend here second. Rank them second. And then she turned around and did the same thing. So you can't really run an effective negative campaign if you do ranked choice voting, because you may not get that second or third vote. And sometimes it takes a second or a third round to get all the candidates.
Yeah, and
Great
we,
example. Thank you.
there were a lot of discussions about, and I think the commission had circulated materials just about studies about ranked choice voting and explaining it and things of that nature.
Harrison Lee does his homework,
Yep.
and he gave us a lot of homework to read. So the answer to your question, whether it's this amendment that didn't go through or any of the other 10, we spent a lot of time talking about it. We always, and as you're seeing now, usually one person, took on a subject and researched it for us. I mean, Gene is gone, but Gene had enough to do from the city. We really were all volunteers, and frankly, we were all volunteers doing our own research as well.
And I would tell you that the ranked choice voting and the do with council or the mayor, that was commission from their own thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
As to why council voted it down, I think I alluded to it earlier. Cuyahoga County can handle it. And that was the stated reason for at least one no vote on it.
So that is not going to be the case in the future. Cuyahoga County will be able to.
We expect that they'll get the appropriate machinery in place
Yes.
to address it.
And as I said earlier, there was a 2-year period. We absolutely understood we couldn't just turn around and go to ranked choice voting right away.
I might also add that the Cuyahoga County has to conduct the election the way we want, and they have
That's
to figure
right.
it out.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, a couple of the council candidates said if you had ranked choice voting now, they would have had to figure out how to do it.
Well, but they don't have to figure it. It would have been on the ballot this time, but as Steve has said, it wouldn't have been effective until the municipal election in
Right.
2025.
So I think we've exhausted that subject for now. It does sound like this is an issue that is going to come forward, though. Again, it's popular enough. And so the last issue is hybrid council, which I have not read about. I don't know if any of the rest of you have read about it, but I think you will need to. I'm not going to read it while I'm sitting up
Okay.
here. Thank you.
I just
I
got enough time.
If you could explain what the hybrid council is.
Sure. Currently, we have at-large council. And that means that you run at the entire city level versus, say, Cleveland, that has wards. So you run at the ward level. Other cities have a hybrid council. And this failed in the commission by one vote. We had a really robust discussion about it. And there were some really good points brought up on each side. I lean towards the hybrid council, but I also understand why some people had some concerns about it. So our recommendation was for 4 ward seats and 3 at large. University Heights is not really a melting pot, it's more of a mosaic. And we have sections of the city that have, say, higher poverty rates. We have a section of the city that is we have a census tract that's 62%, 59% African American. We have another section of the city is only 9%. So we're not really a melting pot. One of the things we looked at when we looked at a hybrid council is we went to the model cities, and for the first time, they are recommending a hybrid council. Some of the cities that have hybrid councils are near us are South Euclid, Oakwood, Richmond Heights, Lyndhurst, Bay Village. 24 of the cities and villages in Cuyahoga County have at large, 22 have a hybrid, and 10 have wards. Bedford, Warrensville Heights, Solon have wards. we think that it is possible that we could have more civic engagement if you have a council person that represents your particular area. I touched on it before that we frequently have undervotes ranging over 20% all the way up to 46% for council races. We think that that could change if you know that this particular council person is going to represent your area, as well as having council people that look at the city as a whole. Now, one of the arguments against it was it could cause some type of division. Well, the city's already divided and people cause divisions. I understand that, but I tend to disagree.
I'm
It-
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted one thing. I see in this audience a lot of veterans of a lot of campaigns, and campaigns are about money. One of the things that a hybrid election can do, I mean, I was just looking at what campaign signs. I mean, people to buy 100 signs right now is $1,000, and that for a city that's how you cover University Heights. A hybrid election in a city like University Heights to run in a ward, whatever we want to call it, is about 2.5 precincts. It's retail politics. You can knock on enough doors. You can get to enough people. And oftentimes there are people who are interested in running for office. And then when they start seeing what the cost involved is and everything else, they tend to back away. The other thing I would say, in many cities where people start off having run an award, once they're well enough known, they do run at large as well. But I think one of the positives is literally on a low budget retail politics. So in a situation where you have 2.5 precincts, somebody who's motivated enough with very few dollars in their pockets could actually win.
I might add, as far as cost, if we look at 8,898 voters, if just to send a postcard to all of those voters at the sort rate of 32 cents, 32.5 cents would be $2,800. And that's just for one mailing. If you were to send a postcard to all of the voters running, if you were running at large. Running an award, that cost is going to be a lot less.
And the only cons I think that were discussed either at the commission or council level were, I think I cautioned the commission, there is always the Euclid problem.
Yes.
I mean, we go through this at the state level, okay? We're still going through redistricting. The Republican-dominated Ohio Supreme Court kept telling the legislature, this is unconstitutional, redo it. And what happened? We still had an election. They didn't redo it. And now they're still arguing over it. And what Euclid had done in the past with their wards is they gerrymandered them. And they gerrymandered them and they got in trouble and federal court trouble and civil rights trouble.
What happened was the African-American population of Euclid it was over 50%, as I remember.
Correct.
Yet they didn't have any African-American council people.
No, because they just kept redrawing the wards to make sure that a Caucasian candidate would win. And that's the reality of what occurred. So that was number one. Number two, if I recall at the council level with the wards, it was, well, the city's only 2 square miles. The whole city's walkable, yada, 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 you can walk.
But
I'm saying that's what was
Yeah.
brought up at the council level.
there's a thought that we're too small. No, not really. There are smaller cities that also have either hybrid or wards. So it's not based on size.
Not geographic, population, yeah.
One of the things that we looked at is, someone asked, did we study whatever? And, groups like the National League of Cities have really said the new and best model to get good representation is the hybrid method. You still have people who are running at large and have to appeal to a larger, to the entire city, but it is good for representation that you also have a mix of folks who are running in a ward or a geographic area.
We done? I don't have any questions on that particular amendment. It sounds very inconclusive at this point. Is that what you're saying? And
As I said, there we go. We lost by one vote, and I don't know that it's inconclusive. I just think that what we were looking at, even the things that quote that amendment that barely failed, is that it fit with what we were talking about earlier. We're talking about how to have government that is more open, that people feel they're participating in. And if you look at, and I know we didn't get ranked choice voting, and obviously we didn't get hybrid, but I'm very, very happy with some of the things we did get. We've made it easier for citizens to petition government. We've made it, and I think that's very important. We've also made it very, very clear what is discrimination and how the city not only deals with its employees, but the people they hire. So I consider those wins. I'll take 6 of 10.
Yeah, one of the neat things I thought is we were able to have a really robust discussion, and it was civil.
congratulations. I'm going to take Mr. Wertheim's comments as a concluding comment and give Mr. Myrick and I've already forgotten names. Myrick and Cicero, I'm going to give you each a chance to make a concluding remark if you'd like to, but you don't have to.
Oh, I always like to speak. It was, thank you for having, yes, thank you for having us. But, just, it's sort of, when you're a kid and you're growing up on Lower Ashers and all you wanted to be was a University Heights garbage man and drive the Cushman carts up and down the street and up and down the driveways. I think back to that time, and it was a real privilege to sit and give legal advice to the commission members and council to try to improve the quality of life of the residents.
Mr. Myrick, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, it forced me to think about the how a city operates, how democracy operates at a much deeper level. And I've said this before, but it was really refreshing to be able to have robust discussions and still remain civil.
Yes. This is highly out of order.
As I'm the husband of a moderator, and I'm a former member of Pepper Pike City Council, and I think University Heights should be immensely proud of the work of the commission, as shown tonight, and proud of the participation of its citizenry in this very healthy exercise in democracy.
Reminds us why we lived here for so long. So I'm going to conclude the forum at this time on the charter amendments for University Heights. I'd like to thank all of our planners, our volunteers, and our speakers, and all of you for attending. And please do spread your thoughts to family, friends, and neighbors so this forum goes wider. And recommend that people watch the forum on the YouTube channel, which we have usually pretty good participation in that. Residents who are here, you're invited to talk with the commission members after we conclude. We do have to move out into the hallway because the room needs to be cleaned up. But I'm sure that they would be happy to stay and talk with you further if you have things you would like to know or say. So be sure to vote on November 7th, and good night, everyone.